Ella was just a maid, one of many who worked in the city's grandest mansion. Her days began before sunrise, pulling on a plain, worn uniform and setting about her endless tasks. From the highest attic to the deepest cellar, she cleaned. She scrubbed floors until they gleamed, polished silver until it shone, and dusted every forgotten corner. Her work was invisible, meant to create a perfect backdrop for a life she could only dream of. Though she had nothing to her name, Ella carried a secret wealth within her heart full of kindness, and a spirit that refused to be dampened by her circumstances. One dreary morning, with rain streaking down the tall glass windows, Ella was carefully carrying a tea tray to the living room. The scent of bergamot and warm scones filled the air, a small comfort in the otherwise silent, imposing house. As she passed the French doors leading to the garden, a faint sound caught her ear. It was a soft, choked sob. Peeking through the rain-splattered glass, she saw a small boy huddled on a stone bench. He was all alone, his tiny shoulders shaking, his face buried in his hands. He looked so lost, so utterly desolate, that a pang of sympathy shot through Ella's heart. She knew she shouldn't interfere, that she had duties to attend to, but she couldn't just walk away. Setting the tray down on a nearby table, she quietly slipped out into the garden. The cool, damp air clung to her skin. The boy didn't notice her approach. She had no toys, no sweets, nothing to offer a child of this house. Then, an idea sparked. She remembered a small, forgotten bottle of dish soap left by the kitchen sink. It wasn't much, but it was something. She hurried back inside, grabbed the soap, and returned to the garden, her heart pounding with a mix of nervousness and hope. She dipped her finger into the soapy water and found a fallen twig on the ground. She formed a small loop at its end, dipped it in, and gently blew. A single, shimmering bubble wobbled into the air, catching the gray morning light and painting it with a rainbow of colors. It floated lazily towards the boy before popping silently on the wet grass. The boy lifted his head, his tear-streaked face a mask of confusion. He watched her with wide, suspicious eyes. Ella just smiled warmly and blew another bubble, and then another. Soon, a small fleet of iridescent orbs was drifting through the air. One landed softly on his shoe, another on his outstretched finger. A tiny giggle escaped his lips, a sound as fragile as the bubbles themselves. He wiped his eyes with the back of his hand and watched, captivated. Ella's smile widened. She blew bigger bubbles, smaller bubbles, a long chain of bubbles that danced in the light drizzle. The boy's tentative giggles grew into full, uninhibited laughter. He scrambled off the bench and began to chase them, his small hands reaching out to catch the magical, floating spheres. Ella's heart swelled with a pure, simple joy. She laughed with him, her own worries melting away in the face of his happiness. She ran around the lawn, her plain uniform now damp with rain, making the bubbles swirl and twirl around him. For these few precious minutes, she wasn't a maid in a grand house. She was just a friend, sharing a moment of innocent fun with a little boy. His delighted squeals echoed through the quiet garden, a melody of pure bliss that seemed to push back the morning gloom. It was a simple, beautiful scene, a pocket of warmth in a cold, rainy world. But they were not alone. From the shadowed archway of the patio, a figure stood watching. William Foster, the billionaire owner of the mansion, had come looking for his son, Daniel. He had been worried when he found his son's room empty, his anxiety growing with each passing moment. He had expected to find him crying, perhaps having had a nightmare. What he found instead stopped him in his tracks. He saw a young woman, a maid he'd probably passed 100 times without a second glance, creating a world of wonder for his son with nothing but soap and water. William had met countless people who tried to impress him. They came with grand proposals, lavish gifts, and calculated smiles, all vying for a piece of his fortune or influence. But this was different. This was real. He saw no agenda, no hidden motive. He only saw genuine kindness, a simple act of compassion from a young woman who had nothing to gain. Her laughter wasn't loud or performative. It was soft, musical, and it resonated with a sincerity that struck a chord deep within him. He felt a strange pull, an unfamiliar warmth, spreading through his chest. He remained frozen, an unseen spectator to this private, magical show. He watched as Ella pretended to be a bubble dragon, puffing out a stream of shimmering spheres. And Daniel, the brave knight, tried to pop them all. William hadn't seen his son laugh like this in a long time. Since his wife had passed, a quiet sadness had settled over Daniel, a shadow that no amount of expensive toys or trips could seem to lift. Yet here, a poor maid with a twig and some soap had managed to bring back the light to his son's eyes. William found himself studying her. Her hair was tied back simply, and her face was free of any makeup. Yet, in that moment, she was the most beautiful woman he had ever seen. It wasn't a beauty of flawless features or high fashion, but a beauty that radiated from within, from the goodness of her soul. He felt an overwhelming urge to walk over, to thank her, to ask her name, but he held back, not wanting to shatter the fragile perfection of the moment. He didn't want to be William Foster, the billionaire CEO. He just wanted to be a man witnessing something truly extraordinary. Finally, exhausted and happy, Daniel stopped chasing the bubbles and began clapping his small hands, his face bright with joy. Ella knelt down, her face level with his, and smiled a smile that could have lit up the sky. "Wasn't that fun?" she asked softly. Daniel nodded enthusiastically, his earlier sadness completely forgotten. Seeing the boy's happiness was her only reward, and it was more than enough. She had no idea that this small, spontaneous act of kindness had set in motion a chain of events that would change her life, and his, forever. As Ella gently guided the little boy back towards the house, William finally stepped out from the shadows. His heart was beating faster than usual. He knew, with a certainty that shook him to his core, that this was no ordinary morning. Amidst the falling rain and the ghost of shimmering bubbles, something new had begun. A quiet story of two worlds colliding, sparked not by wealth or power, but by the simple, profound magic of a kind heart. The next day, William found he couldn't stop thinking about the girl who had made his son so incredibly happy. He had met countless people in his life, seen so many beautiful faces and charming personalities, but none had touched him quite like Ella had. There was a sincerity to her, an unassuming grace that felt rare and precious. He decided then and there that he wanted to meet her properly, to learn her name and her story. He began to walk quietly through the mansion, pretending to inspect the rooms, his footsteps echoing softly on the marble floors. His search led him to the grand hallway, where he found her, a lone figure in the vast space, sweeping the floor. She looked up, and her eyes widened in surprise. The broom almost slipped from her grasp when she saw him standing there tall, confident, and impossibly wealthy, yet with a gentle smile playing on his lips. "Hello?" he said softly, his voice warm, trying not to startle her. Ella blinked, her mind racing, completely unsure how to respond to the master of the house addressing her directly. "I'm William," he introduced himself, taking a step closer, "and I wanted to thank you for making my son laugh yesterday. He hasn't stopped talking about the bubbles." Ella's cheeks flushed a deep shade of red. She had never, in her wildest dreams, imagined a man of his stature would speak to her, let alone notice such a small, insignificant act. She stammered a polite, almost inaudible reply. I'm happy he liked it, sir." William's smile widened at her shyness. He found it utterly charming, a refreshing change from the calculated confidence he was used to. "May I know your name?" he asked, his tone gentle and encouraging. "Ella," she replied, her gaze dropping to the floor, her heart hammering in her chest. William nodded, taking a moment to study her face. He sought the genuine sincerity in her eyes, the kindness etched into her smile, and in that instant, something profound shifted within him. Over the next few days, he found himself manufacturing excuses just to talk to her. He'd ask her questions about the household, about his son, and he'd make light. Silly jokes that coaxed nervous, beautiful laughter out of her. Slowly but surely, Ella began to feel more comfortable around him. She started to see that he wasn't just the powerful, intimidating CEO everyone in the city spoke of in hushed, reverent tones. He was also a man who genuinely cared about the small, simple things in life. For William, this was a revelation. He found a strange, unfamiliar joy in these brief encounters. Listening to Ella speak about her life, her simple dreams, and even her struggles, made him feel connected to a world he had long ignored. A world of authenticity and quiet dignity. He started noticing the little details about her. The way she would wring her hands when she was nervous. The way her eyes would sparkle with an inner light when she laughed. The soft, gentle honesty in her voice. These small observations filled a void in him he never knew existed. One afternoon, he found her in the garden, her hands gently tending to the flowers. The sunlight caught in her hair, and for a moment, he just watched, captivated. He approached her and asked if she could show him how she did it. Ella hesitated at first, her surprise evident. Why would a man like him want to learn about gardening? But seeing the genuine curiosity in his eyes, she agreed. She guided his hands, showing him how to prune a rosebush, and laughed openly when he clumsily made a mistake. The moment was small, completely ordinary, yet it felt magical, charged with an unspoken connection. Just then, his son, noticing his father spending time with Ella, came running out into the garden. He shouted happily and threw his little arms around her knees in a tight hug. William watched the scene unfold silently, a powerful realization dawning on him. Ella was no longer just a caretaker or a maid in his home. She had become someone essential, not just to his son's happiness, but to the awakening of his own heart. That evening, as Ella returned to her small, humble room after a long day, her mind was a whirlwind of thoughts. She replayed her conversations with the strange, kind man who had so unexpectedly walked into her life. She wondered why he had noticed her, a simple maid, in a mansion full of staff. Why had he smiled at her with such warmth and kindness? And why did she feel a strange, fluttering sensation in her chest every time she remembered his gentle words and the sound of his voice? It was confusing and exhilarating all at once. Meanwhile, miles away in his lavish study, William sat staring at the ceiling, completely unable to concentrate on his work. The spreadsheets and reports on his desk seemed meaningless. His mind kept replaying the sound of Ella's laughter, her innocent gestures, and the way she had managed to make a simple rainy day feel bright and full of life. Something was growing between them, an invisible thread connecting their two very different worlds. It was something neither of them fully understood yet, but it was powerful, tender, and utterly undeniable. This was a connection that crossed the vast, unbridgeable boundaries of wealth and social class. It was a bond that had started with a simple act of kindness, a few bubbles on a gloomy afternoon, and was now quietly and beautifully blossoming into something more. Both of them were unaware that this small beginning, filled with shared laughter and quiet gestures, was just the first chapter of a story that would change their lives forever. It was the beginning of a story of love, one that neither money nor status could ever define or contain. In the week that followed, William found himself searching for Eli more than he did for profits in his business files. Every time he moved through the grand mansion, his gaze would instinctively drift towards the hallways, the kitchen door, or the garden, secretly hoping for a fleeting glimpse of her. For her part, Ella tried to immerse herself in her work, but she couldn't quell the strange new feelings blossoming within her heart. She'd often catch herself smiling without reason, the memory of William's laughter replaying in her mind. The time he tried to water the plants and ended up soaking his own expensive shoes. One bright, sunny afternoon, as Ella was diligently polishing the tall glass windows in the living room, a soft footstep behind her made her pause. She turned to find William standing there, a warm, gentle smile on his face, holding 2 steaming cups of coffee. "You look tired," he said softly. "I thought you might need a break." Ella froze, her mind reeling. No one had ever shown her such a simple, personal kindness, especially not someone of his stature, someone so powerful and important. She hesitantly reached for the cup, her hand trembling just a little. "Thank you, sir," she whispered, her voice barely audible. William took a sip from his own cup and leaned casually against the window frame, his presence filling the space. He wasn't watching her work. He was watching her. He started asking simple questions. How her day was going, if she'd had lunch, whether the workload was too heavy. Ella, initially shy, found herself relaxing as he listened to her answers with an earnest interest that felt incredibly real. As she returned to wiping the glass, she caught his reflection in the pane. His eyes were soft, filled with a gentle curiosity, as if he were trying to piece together the puzzle of who she was. Her cheeks flushed with warmth, and she quickly looked away, unaccustomed to being the center of such focused attention. Later that day, William called her out to the garden again, using the excuse that he needed her help choosing flowers for his office. Ella knew it was just a pretense. A man like him had staff for such things. But the way he asked, with that warm tone and those hopeful eyes, made it impossible for her to say no. As they strolled between the vibrant flower beds, a small voice suddenly cried out, "Ella! Ella!" and his little boy came racing out of the house, throwing his arms around her legs in a tight hug. William watched, his heart melting at the sight. He saw how naturally his son clung to her, how easily she lifted the boy into her arms, making him giggle with delight. A genuine smile spread across William's face as he took in the peaceful, happy scene. But this budding connection did not go unnoticed, nor was it universally approved of. From a balcony above, 2 other housekeeping staff watched with expressions of clear disapproval. "She's getting far too close to him," one whispered venomously. "He's the CEO?" the other added with a sneer. "She needs to remember her place." Ella, lost in the moment with the child, heard nothing. But William saw their scornful looks, and a sharp sting of irritation shot through him. He didn't care what people thought, but a wave of protectiveness washed over him. He worried that their gossip could hurt her. As the day drew to a close, Ella retreated to her small, humble room, her heart a whirlwind of confusion. William had been kind, gentle, almost overwhelmingly caring, and she had no idea what to make of it all. She was just a maid, someone paid to clean floors and wash dishes. Why would a man who had everything, a man from a completely different world, show even a flicker of interest in her? The question scared her, yet a secret, fragile hope began to take root, a wish that maybe, just maybe, she mattered to him in some small way. Meanwhile, William sat alone in his vast, silent office, long after dinner. The business report on his desk was a blur of meaningless numbers. His mind was elsewhere, filled with images of Ella, her smile, the way She unconsciously wiped a bead of sweat from her brow. The gentle care with which she held his son. He felt an inexplicable pull towards her, a connection that went far beyond physical attraction. Though he certainly found her beautiful, it was something deeper. He saw in her a pure, untainted kindness, a quality he felt he had lost somewhere along his own complicated path. Yet, a persistent worry gnawed at him. He was a realist. He knew what people would say. They would question their closeness, whispering behind their hands. The next few days brought a quiet storm into the mansion. Even though the weather outside was calm, a chill had settled inside. Ella noticed it first in the eyes of the other staff. Their smiles, once friendly, were now cold and sharp, filled with a jealousy she couldn't understand. Why were they suddenly looking at her this way? The answer came one afternoon when she was heading to the laundry room. She overheard two maids whispering, their voices dripping with mockery. She thinks she's special just because the CEO talks to her. One of them sneered. The other let out a harsh laugh. A maid dreaming about a millionaire. What a joke. Ella froze in her tracks, her heart sinking like a stone. She quietly stepped back before they could see her, but their words had already found their mark. They cut deep, leaving a heavy ache in her chest. She tried to brush it off, to focus on her duties, but the mansion suddenly felt immense and incredibly lonely. Every corner seemed to hold judging eyes. Every whisper felt like it was about her. Meanwhile, William remained blissfully unaware of the silent pain spreading through his home, all centered on the young woman who had brought a spark of joy back into his son's life. That evening, he found Ella in the kitchen, her hands submerged in a sink full of dishes. He noticed the exhaustion in her eyes and the way she deliberately avoided his gaze. "Ella, are you okay?" he asked, his voice soft. She managed a small, forced smile and nodded. "Just tired, sir." But William wasn't convinced. He knew her well enough by now to see through the facade. He stepped closer, lowering his voice so only she could hear. "You know you can talk to me, right?" At the unexpected kindness in his voice, her hands trembled in the warm dish water. She was surprised by how much she wanted to tell him everything, yet she couldn't. She was afraid that if she started talking, all her feelings would spill out in an unstoppable flood. So she stayed silent, her throat tight with unshed tears. William wanted to press her, to say more, to coax the truth from her. But before he could, two of his senior relatives walked into the kitchen. Their expressions were serious, their presence immediately changing the atmosphere. They greeted William politely, but shot Ella a cold, dismissive stare, as if her proximity to him was a personal offense. The moment turned awkward and tense. Ella quickly stepped away, busying herself with cleaning a spotless corner of the counter, just to put some distance between them. Later that evening, one of the relatives, William's aunt, pulled him aside for a private conversation. Their voices were low but firm, carrying an unmistakable tone of warning. "William, you must be careful," his aunt cautioned, her eyes stern. "You are the head of this family. People are watching every move you make. That girl, she is not from our world." A wave of irritation washed over William. He kept his voice calm, but there was an edge to it. "She made my son smile. That alone earns my respect," he replied, but his aunt was relentless. She shook her head, her lips pursed in disapproval. "Respect is one thing. Attachment is another. You know what people will say if you get too close? The rumors will be merciless, not just for you, but for her." Her words hung in the air, long after she left, echoing in William's mind. He didn't want Ella to be hurt by gossip or judged by people who knew nothing about her kindness and her spirit. He felt a fierce, protective instinct rise within him. That night, Ella sat on the edge of her small, simple bed, a whirlwind of sadness and fear churning inside her. She replayed her aunt's cold stare, the maid's cruel whispers, and William's gentle concern. It was all becoming too much. She wondered if the best thing to do was to distance herself from William, to fade back into the background before things got any worse. She didn't want to cause trouble in the mansion, and she certainly didn't want to be the reason people were talking behind his back. "Maybe I should just stay away," she whispered to the empty room, her eyes filling with tears that she quickly wiped away with the back of her hand. The thought of losing the small, fragile connection they had built was painful, but the fear of what could happen was even greater. The next morning, Ella put her plan into action. She deliberately avoided the garden, the one place she was almost guaranteed to see William and Leo. Instead, she took on cleaning tasks in the most remote parts of the mansion, hoping he wouldn't notice her absence. But he did. When he walked into the living room and didn't see her arranging flowers, when he passed the garden and didn't hear her soft humming, he felt a distinct sense of wrongness. Something was missing. He searched for her, a knot of concern tightening in his stomach. He finally found her in a dusty, forgotten storage room on the third floor, quietly dusting old shelves all by herself. "Ella," he said gently, not wanting to startle her. She jumped anyway, turning around with wide, panicked eyes. I'm not hiding, sir. I just thought I would work here today. William studied her face, seeing the sadness she was trying so desperately to conceal. The dark circles under her eyes told him she hadn't slept well. Did someone say something to you? He asked, his voice serious and direct. Ella shook her head quickly, too quickly. She didn't want to cause any problems or appear weak. No, sir, everything is fine. But William didn't believe her for a second. He knew her better than that. He stepped closer, his presence filling the small, cluttered room. His voice was firm, but wrapped in a layer of undeniable care. Ella, listen to me. You don't have to be afraid of anyone in this house. You belong here just as much as they do. Her heart fluttered at his powerful words, a warmth spreading through her chest. But the fear that had taken root was still holding on tight. She couldn't understand why he was being so kind, why he seemed to care so much about his simple maid. As she lowered her eyes, unable to handle the intensity of his gaze, William did something that took her completely by surprise. He gently lifted her chin with his hand, forcing her to meet his eyes. His touch was light, but it sent a jolt through her. You matter, he said softly, his voice a low, intimate murmur. More than you think. Ella felt her breath catch in her throat. She was trapped in his gaze, unsure of what this all meant, unsure of what would happen next. But in that moment, one thing became crystal clear. This connection between them, this invisible string that tied them together, was not going away. It seemed that the more people tried to pull them apart, the more fiercely fate conspired to push them closer. The storm in the mansion was no longer quiet. It was about to break. The following weekend, William decided he could no longer stand by and watch Ella suffer in silence. The cruel whispers that echoed through the mansion's hallways had not gone unnoticed. He'd seen the flicker of pain she had tried so hard to hide in her eyes. The way her shoulders slumped and she kept her head down, avoiding his gaze to protect herself. It bothered him, more than he had anticipated, and a deep-seated need to act took hold. He knew he had to do something, not just for her, but for the sense of justice he believed in. He meticulously planned a small family gathering. Nothing too extravagant, just a gathering in the mansion's grand hall. He invited only a handful of close relatives and a few trusted friends, the people whose opinions mattered. The ones who needed to see the truth with their own eyes. As evening descended, casting a warm, golden glow over the estate, Ella was busy in the kitchen. She moved with quiet efficiency, arranging trays of delicate snacks, completely unaware of the event unfolding in the hall. Her world was confined to her duties, and she expected nothing more than another quiet night of work. Suddenly, a senior maid, known for her stern demeanor, approached her. Mr. William wants to see you in the hall, she said, her voice stiff and void of any warmth. Ella's heart immediately leaped into her throat. A wave of nervousness washed over her. What could she have possibly done wrong? Her mind raced, replaying every action of the day. She quickly wiped her damp hands on her apron, smoothed out the wrinkles in her uniform, and made her way to the hall, each footstep heavy with dread, her heart pounding a frantic rhythm against her ribs. When she pushed open the heavy oak door and stepped inside, a sea of faces turned to look at her. The chatter died down instantly. She froze in the doorway, a deer caught in headlights, feeling a hot blush creep up her neck. The collective stare was overwhelming, and she was utterly confused and embarrassed. Why was everyone looking at her? Then, William stepped forward, breaking away from the group. His eyes, warm and steady, found hers across the room. Ella, he said, his voice gentle but clear enough to carry through the silence. Come here. She felt rooted to the spot, but his calm demeanor gave her the strength to move. She walked slowly toward him, feeling the weight of every gaze, each pair of eyes, a physical pressure. She wanted nothing more than to turn and run, to disappear from this spotlight she never asked for. As she drew near, William took a small, reassuring step toward her, a silent gesture that gave her a surge of courage. Once she stood beside him, her hands trembling at her sides, he turned to face his guests. There is someone here I want you all to know, he announced, his voice ringing with authority. The room fell into an even deeper hush. His relatives exchanged puzzled glances, their whispers ceasing entirely. Ella's heart was racing so fast she thought it might burst. She had absolutely no idea what was happening, what he was about to do. William continued, his voice resonating with conviction. This young woman has shown more kindness and honesty than anyone I've met in a long time. She brought joy to my son when he needed it most. She brought a light into this house when it felt dark and empty. And she did all of this without ever expecting anything in return. Ella's eyes widened in pure shock. Her hands started to shake uncontrollably, and she dropped her gaze to the floor, unable to process his words. Was he really talking about her? It felt like a dream. Then, she felt a gentle pressure on her shoulder. William had placed his hand on her, a simple, protective gesture that sent a collective gasp rippling through the room. I want everyone in this house to treat her with respect, he said, his tone firm and unwavering, leaving no room for argument, because she deserves it. For a long moment, complete silence reigned. You could have heard a pin drop. Some of his relatives shifted uncomfortably in their seats, their expressions a mix of shock and unease. Others looked stunned, and a few had the decency to look embarrassed, their earlier judgments now hanging heavy in the air. Just then, the silence was broken by the sound of small, running feet. William's little boy, who had been watching from the side, darted forward and wrapped his arms tightly around Ella's waist. He giggled, looking up at her with pure adoration, as if to second his father's heartfelt speech. William looked down at Ella, a soft, encouraging smile gracing his lips. It was a look that silently asked her to trust him, to let him handle this. A warm rush of emotions flooded her: shock, profound gratitude, lingering confusion, and something else, something deeper that she didn't dare to name. She managed to find her voice, though it came out as a barely audible whisper. "Sir, you didn't have to do this." Leaning closer so only she could hear, William replied, his voice a low, intimate murmur. "I wanted to." After the gathering finally concluded and the guests departed, their minds swirling with the night's unexpected turn of events, Ella fled back to the sanctuary of the kitchen. Her heart was a hummingbird, beating frantically against her ribs. She needed a moment, a quiet space to breathe and try to make sense of it all. She leaned against the cool marble counter, taking deep, shuddering breaths. Why? Why would he defend her, a simple maid, in front of his powerful family? Why would a wealthy CEO, a man of his stature, speak so highly of her? She felt utterly overwhelmed, yet beneath the confusion, a strange, unfamiliar happiness began to bloom. A few minutes later, the quiet swing of the kitchen door announced his arrival. William entered, his presence filling the space. "Are you upset?" he asked softly, his voice full of concern. Ella shook her head, though her eyes were still glassy with unshed tears. "No, sir. Just confused." He stepped closer, closing the distance between them. His voice was impossibly gentle. "Ella, I meant every word I said out there. You are special, and I will not let anyone, in this house or anywhere else, make you feel small." Her breath caught in her throat as she finally dared to look up at him. His gaze was sincere, warm, and unwavering. For the first time, she didn't just hear his words. She felt their truth resonate deep within her soul. In that moment, in the quiet intimacy of the kitchen, something fundamental had shifted between them. It was something real, something powerful. And although Ella couldn't yet fully understand the depth of this change, she knew one thing with absolute certainty. This was the moment their hearts began. The days after the gathering felt different for both Ella and William, as if a soft, magical seed had been planted between them. Ella continued her work, cleaning rooms and finishing her chores. But now, she moved through the mansion with a lighter heart. The staff who once whispered about her now fell silent. Some even treated her with a newfound respect, thanks to William's firm defense of her. Through it all, Ella remained humble and gentle, never letting the shift in attention change who she was. William, on the other hand, found himself irresistibly drawn to her. He'd find reasons to leave his office, just for a glimpse of her sweeping a hallway or arranging flowers in a vase. And every time their eyes met, a shy warmth would bloom in Ella's chest. A silent acknowledgement of the connection growing between them. One bright, sunny morning, he found her in the garden again, her hands moving with delicate care as she trimmed the rose bushes. "You take care of these flowers better than anyone," he said softly, his voice making her jump. Ella straightened up, surprised, and nervously wiped her hands on her apron. "I just try my best, sir," she whispered, her gaze falling to the ground. William shook his head gently. "No, Ella, you don't just try. You put your heart into everything you do." His words were like a warm touch, bringing a blush to her cheeks. She looked down, trying to hide her smile. Just then, a cheerful shout broke the quiet moment. "Ella, come play." The little boy ran into the garden, his face alight with joy. He grabbed her hand before she could even respond, pulling her towards the lawn. William laughed, his heart swelling at his son's infectious excitement. Ella played with the boy, blowing bubbles that floated and shimmered in the sunlight, and William watched, a quiet, profound sense of peace settling over him. Seeing his son so unreservedly happy, and seeing the pure joy that Ella brought into their lives, made something deep inside him melt away. It was a feeling of coming home. Later that afternoon, William found Ella and asked if she would walk with him by the lake behind the mansion. She hesitated, a flicker of uncertainty in her eyes. It felt improper, crossing a line she had always been careful to maintain. But his gentle insistence, the sincerity in his gaze, made her agree. As they walked, a soft breeze rustled the leaves in the trees overhead, and the calm water of the lake reflected the vast blue sky like a perfect mirror. The world seemed to hold its breath around them. "Ella," William began, his voice soft, breaking the peaceful silence. "Do you ever think about your future?" She paused, caught off guard by the question. "My future?" she repeated, unsure of what he was asking. "Yes," he said, his tone gentle. "Your dreams, your hopes, what you truly want from life." Ella let out a quiet sigh, her shoulders slumping just a little. "Sir, I don't really think about those things. People like me don't get to dream big. We just work hard and hope for a peaceful life." William felt a sharp ache in his chest at her words. How could someone with such a pure, vibrant heart believe she wasn't allowed to dream? It felt fundamentally wrong. "Ella," he said, his voice firm but kind, compelling her to look at him. "You deserve more than just surviving." She looked up, her soft eyes filled with confusion. "Why do you say that, sir?" His own heart was pounding, a battle raging within him between fear and the overwhelming need to be honest. He held her gaze. "Because you make everything brighter. You make my son laugh in a way I haven't heard in years. You bring a sense of peace to this house that was long gone. And," his voice dropped to a near whisper, full of an emotion he could no longer hide, "you make my days better just by being here." Ella's breath caught in her throat. No one had ever spoken to her with such sincerity, such tenderness. She felt her heart tremble with a storm of emotions she couldn't begin to name. "Sir, you're very kind," she managed to say, though her voice was shaky and small. William offered a soft, genuine smile. "It's simply the truth." For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The air around them felt warm, heavy, and thick with unspoken feelings. Ella had always believed that the rich lived in a world entirely separate from her own, a world high above her, untouchable. But standing beside William now, she felt a connection that was both gentle and incredibly strong, a bridge forming between their two worlds. As they started to walk back toward the mansion, William deliberately slowed his steps, just to prolong the moment, to stay by her side a little longer. Their hands brushed against each other by accident, a fleeting touch that sent a sudden spark, a jolt of electricity, through both of them. Their hearts fluttered in unison. Ella quickly pulled her hand back, her face flushing a deep crimson, while William smiled to himself. He knew, with a quiet certainty, that this feeling, whatever was happening between them, was real. It was growing with every shared glance, every quiet moment. That night, Ella lay on her small, simple bed, sleep completely eluding her. She placed a hand over her chest, feeling the frantic, racing beat of her heart. She wondered if she was being foolish, allowing herself to feel this way for a man so far beyond her reach. Meanwhile, in his large, grand bedroom, William stared up at the ceiling, filled with the same restless, buzzing energy. His mind was consumed with thoughts of her gentle smile, her unwavering kindness, and the way her mere presence made him feel truly alive for the first time in a long time. Neither of them dared to say the words out loud, not even to themselves. But deep in their hearts, in the quiet solitude of their own rooms, they both knew the truth. Something beautiful and unexpected was beginning, a love that neither of them had been looking for, but one that both were now, slowly and surely, falling into. The morning after, something had shifted. A quiet, profound change had settled into the lives of both Ella and William. An unspoken truth that had been blossoming for weeks, now demanding to be acknowledged. Ella found herself awake before the sun, standing before the small mirror in her room. As she slowly brushed her hair, her mind replayed every moment with William, his unexpected kindness, the intensity in his gaze, the comforting warmth she felt whenever he was near. Across town, William sat in his office, the early morning light casting long shadows across the room. He stared out the window, a realization dawning on him that he could no longer deny. He had fallen for Ella, not for some idealized version of her, but for the real, kind, and resilient woman she was, a strength that had touched the deepest part of his soul. Later that afternoon, a message from William appeared on Ella's phone. He asked to meet her at the quiet park by the old fountain, the very place where so many of their honest, heart-to-heart conversations had taken place. Her heart hammered against her ribs as she read his words. A familiar whisper of fear coiled in her stomach, fear that she wasn't good enough for a man like him, fear of opening her heart only to have it broken again. But she pushed it down, taking a deep, steadying breath. She chose a simple dress and walked towards the park, resolved to listen to her heart, just this once. When she arrived, William was already there, waiting by the fountain with a nervous yet gentle smile. The moment their eyes met, a soft, warm light filled his, and Ella felt her anxieties begin to dissolve. He stepped closer, his voice low and steady. "Ella," he began, "I need to tell you something important. My life changed the moment you walked into it. You showed me kindness when I felt I didn't deserve it, and you made me feel alive again." I don't want to hide how I feel anymore. I care about you, deeply. The air left Ella's lungs. Tears welled in her eyes, blurring his image. For so long, she had convinced herself that love was a luxury she couldn't afford, a story written for other people. She looked down at her hands, her voice barely a whisper. William, I'm scared. My life is so simple. I don't have anything to offer. I don't want to be a burden. He gently lifted her chin, his touch sending a shiver through her, forcing her to meet his earnest gaze. You are not a burden, he said, his voice firm but tender. You are the best thing that has happened to me. I don't care about money, or your past, or anything else. I just want you. At his words, something inside her finally gave way, not with a crack of pain, but with a sigh of profound relief, as if a part of her soul had been holding its breath, waiting to hear those very words. She closed the small distance between them. I care about you too, she whispered, the admission feeling both terrifying and liberating. More than I wanted to admit. A genuine, heartfelt smile spread across William's face. He pulled her into a warm embrace, a hug that felt like coming home. In his arms, Ella felt safe, cherished, and completely understood. For a long, perfect moment, the world around them seemed to fall away, leaving just the two of them by the old stone fountain. In the weeks that followed, their love story unfolded naturally, like a flower turning towards the sun. It was a relationship built on a foundation of gentle trust and slow, steady affection. William introduced Ella to his sister, who was instantly charmed, remarking that she had never seen her brother so genuinely happy. With William's unwavering support, Ella began to find her confidence. She took the first small, exciting steps toward her dream of becoming a children's caretaker and tutor, her passion for it growing each day. Months later, one peaceful evening, William took her back to the park. The sky was painted in soft hues of pink and gold as they stood before the same fountain where he had first confessed his feelings. Ella's heart began to race with a sweet anticipation, wondering what he had planned. He took both of her hands in his eyes serious but full of love. Then, to her utter astonishment, he knelt down on one knee. Ella, he said, his voice thick with emotion. You came into my life when I least expected it, and you changed everything for the better. You taught me how to feel again, how to hope again. Will you marry me and build a life with me? Tears of pure joy streamed down her face as she nodded, the word a soft, breathless sound. Yes. He slid a delicate ring onto her finger, then stood to pull her into a tight hug. She cried softly against his chest, not from sadness, but from an overwhelming sense of happiness, a feeling she now knew she deserved. And so, their story found its beautiful beginning, not one of grand drama, but one of quiet hope, enduring love, and the simple, undeniable magic of two hearts finally finding their way to each other.